and gentlemen, please put your hands together one more time for Donna Ottaviano Britt.
So, good morning, holy, beautiful people. How are you this morning? So, I am delighted to bring to stage the author of the book that you all read to prepare for the Convocation, Everyone Leads. I brought my own copy, and you can see all the little tabs I have down the side of the book, because there are so many great ideas in here, and Chris has really done a remarkable job of trying to share through his book ideas for us to think about. And you'll notice the talk title for him is Getting Our Shoes Dusty, right? Doing the work that is necessary for us to be Christ's presence in the world, his hands and feet. So I just need him to come up here and I need to get off. So please welcome Chris Lowney to the stage.
Okay, friends, the microphone works okay? Sounds like it. Okay, wonderful. So look, I know we just finished praying, but that's okay if we pray some more. So why don't we take another 10 seconds quietly, and why don't we ask for God's Holy Spirit to come powerfully into our midst, and not only that, more importantly, to follow all you guys home and stay with you. So let's just take 10 seconds for that. Okay, great. There was a precise countdown clock, and I presume the Holy Spirit was also watching. So, okay, why don't we get started here? And first, just some housekeeping. So here's my email, chrislowney@gmail.com. You want any of the slides or to follow up, just send me an email, no problem. I'm more than happy to give anything to you. Use it if you want. Just don't charge money using my stuff. You can't do that. Okay. Why don't we start with a little thinking and chatting? Why don't you think about these questions? Why don't you think of the names of one or two living people that you would consider to be leaders, good leaders? And why do you think of such names? So what are some of the personal characteristics or qualities or attributes that you'd associate with somebody who's leading well? I'm going to give you 30 seconds back. Why don't you just share a name or two, and more importantly, the ideas with one or two people nearby. I'll give you 30 seconds. Okay, friends, time's up. Let's hear a name or two. Let's not worry about why. Just somebody give me a name. Huh? Pope Francis, okay, let's get one more name. And sorry? Oh, okay, Bishop Sullivan. Okay. Okay, good. That's a good list. And why do we think of these names? So tell me some of the qualities or attributes that we associate with somebody who's leading well. Okay, they value people. Somebody said integrity. Somebody said they're compassionate. Sets a good example. They seek holiness, and they inspire others. Okay, that's a good enough list. Now, let's have another little thought experiment here. We're kind of building a story, building a narrative together, and I promise you we'll tie together why I asked you these kind of questions. Here's another question. Why don't we think of the world today and the world about 10, 15 years ago? If you think that the world today is faster paced, why don't you raise your hand? Okay, keep your hands up. It's 99.24%. Okay, if you think that the world is more complex, why don't you raise your hand? And finally, if you think that in the course of running your life, living your parish, you don't even lower your hands anymore, you just keep them up, huh? Okay, so we have to cope with more change. So we're in violent agreement about the kind of world we think we're living in. Confusing, complex, changing too rapidly, and it'll make you happy to know that Pope Francis happens to agree with us Oh, we're Catholic. We agree with Pope Francis, I guess I should say. And I'm going to show you something he said that I think has implications in terms of tone setting for us. And the first part of it kind of describes how we all feel, the world we're living through. Too complex. It doesn't feel great. And the end part of the quote has an implication. Despite all that, we got to do something. We can't stand still. Now, let me show you what he says here. Things no longer in their place. Our previous ways of blah, blah, blah. Things we thought would never happen, we're experiencing now. And we dare not even imagine the future. That which appeared normal to us, family, the church, society, and the world, will probably no longer seem that way. He's describing this kind of disequilibrium. We're off balance. It's not what I expected. But the punchline, we cannot simply wait for what we're experiencing to pass under the illusion that things will return to being how they were before. Very important point, because a lot of times when you get into these kind of environments, people's instinct is, okay, let me put on my helmet, get down into the trench, wait until everything calms down, then I'll come back out and get into action. It doesn't work like that. The military thinks about this reality a lot. And unlike the Catholic Church, they don't need like 200 sentences to explain it. You know, this is how the military describes the world in which we're all living in. We're living in a world that's VUCA right now. It's volatile. It's uncertain. It's complex. It's ambiguous. Once I had the privilege to visit Quantico, you know, where they select and train these super elite Marine Special Forces guys. And I asked, you know, they're like making a march in the middle of the night and waking them up and hosing them down with water and torturing them. And I asked the colonel, so what, other than seeing who's tough enough, what skills are you trying to give these people? And he said to me, you know, the only thing I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get these people comfortable with the reality of being uncomfortable. In other words, you're going to drop into a battlefield. People shoot bullets. You don't know quite what's going on. It's very uncomfortable. And in a way, he's saying, yes, that's fine. It is uncomfortable. You're even going to be a little afraid. But we need you to keep going, you know, to accept the fact that we have to kind of move forward here. And of course, in the Catholic Church, we have our own version of VUCA, huh? We got lots of VUCA. I'll give you a few statistics. We could spend the next 4 hours coming up with statistics. Here's a few. 50% of Catholics, teenagers, no longer identify as Catholic a decade later. 22%. The number of Catholic schools in the U.S. fell by 22% just since 2000. 34% decline in number of priests and women religious since year 2000. 6 to 1 of adults who change religion. Catholicism attracts 1 convert for every 6 who leave. Some of you people, I'm sure, have small businesses. How would your small business be doing if this was your statistic right now, huh? Now, thankfully for us, most adults don't actually change religion. And super thankfully for us, our Hispanic brothers and sisters who've come help to balance out this reality that we've had to deal with, huh? Now, VUCA inherently has implications for the reality of leadership and how people lead and so on. So for one thing, leadership really becomes much more important. If I just say, okay, at the end of the presentation, we all go out that door, people could see it, you know where we're going. You're going to go out the door and nobody afterward is going to say, man, Chris was really a great leader. We all saw where we had to go. But when we get into VUCA, one of the implications is people really need help and leadership, and this is where we need to go, and so on. In other words, leadership really becomes much more at a premium. That's why I use that word, and that's why I say we have to start thinking about this very explicitly and intentionally. You know, the idea of leadership and what it looks like and how we all show it, precisely because the world is so confusing. Here's another implication of VUCA. When you get into environments of such complexity, so much change, so many things going on, you need to get more people into the game. When I started working in JP Morgan 40 years ago, you know, the chief executive of JP Morgan could make most of the important decisions, could represent the organization to most of the people it needed to be represented to. And then the world became like that, VUCA. And in a way, our concept of leadership changed a little bit. The chief executive was still the boss. And there were certain authorities and hierarchical roles that went with that. And so to use the analogy, we have bishops and priests. And it wasn't like we needed to take away some of their job, but rather we needed to grow the leadership pie because we had so many challenges, complexities, so much change as an organization that we said, oh man, we need to get more people and bring their talent to bear on this problem, that problem, because no one guy in a corner office is ever going to figure it out. So VUCA really has important implications for how we think about the importance of leadership. Sorry, I'm not going to stop yet. Now, I shared this quote that one of the realities is it makes us cultivate a new skill to get comfortable with the reality of being uncomfortable. Let me put this in our language. The reason why we get comfortable with the reality of being uncomfortable is we're the ones that the Holy Spirit has put on the playing field right now. And I'm sure every one of us wishes the playing field was different. Maybe you wish there were more priests and religious. Maybe you wish that parents were great at catechizing their kids. Maybe you wish that all kinds of people went to church. And those are wonderful things to wish, but that's not the world we have right now. And we're the people who are here right now. And many people here, I'm sure, are parents. And we all know how calling works in the real world. You love the child that's given to you, and sometimes the child turns out exactly as you wished, and sometimes not. But that's the reality of calling. God is calling us to be here at this moment. Not to wish it was a different moment, or to wish there were different people here. So the main part of my message, in a sense, is that the reality of the world we're all dealing with is going to force us to change our culture, to kind of change the way we're doing things. One of them is, for example, to accept the reality of the world we're dealing with and to get more comfortable with it. And here are some more aspects of what I want to call the new culture of leadership that we have to cultivate. And we're probably not going to talk to all of them in the time we have together, but I'm going to talk about a couple of them and one or two of them on this slide. So one, can we create a culture where everyone leads? That is, each person feels a leadership opportunity and responsibility, not just the 9 or 10 characters that came from each parish. But we're going to go back and try to pull more people into the game, huh? I'm going to talk more about that idea. Better leadership skills, because we have the Moses problem. I'll talk about that right now. One team mindset, focused on generating solutions, not scapegoating other Catholics. I'll talk about that right now. Highly entrepreneurial, these other ideas I'll talk about later. But let me start with these, the second and third one. One team mindset, focused on generating solutions. When things go badly in organizations, what's the first thing that every organization does? It's her fault, it's his fault, it's their fault, it's the progressives' fault, it's the traditionalists' fault, it's that fault, it's that fault. And here's a critically important message that I want to plant. When I showed you those statistics, the realities that we face right now as a church, one consequence is the things that got us to where we are now are not the things that are going to get us to where we want to go. Huh? I mean, I hope that's pretty straightforward and obvious. But let me draw out another implication when I say we need to get to a culture that's not about blame and scapegoating. The ways we've operated that got us to where we are now are not going to get us to where we want to go. But I'm not saying Therefore, the ways we've been doing things in the past were all terrible, were all wrong, we had dopey people leading us, we were all stupid, and so on. And we got to get out of that mindset. Maybe the things we were doing were fine for the way the world was. And the world changed around us. Let's just accept that. And let's not spend the next 3 years talking about whose fault it is. Let's just say, okay, great, let's move on together and understand what we need to do in the world that God has given us now and what will bring people to the Lord in this world. And that's not going to be easy because we all have the Moses problem. And let me explain what I mean by that. So remember, I know we're all Catholics, but we know who Moses was, right? In the Bible, Old Testament, that stuff. So Moses, so the people come, the Israelites come out of Egypt. Moses parts the Red Sea. How cool is that? But that was like 48 hours ago. Now like we're in the desert and we don't know where we're going and we're all pretty pissed off. You know how Exodus goes. And they all want to say, okay, look, man, when we were back in Egypt, at least we knew where we were and what the deal was. Now where the heck are we going? And here's the problem that Moses had that you all have. He didn't know either. I mean, of course he knew in some general sense that God is leading us to a promised land. But he couldn't say to these people who wanted clarity in this confusing environment, he couldn't say, okay, look, relax. We're going to take the Garden State to exit whatever, and we're going to turn left, huh? And so in those kind of situations, leadership really becomes important. And maybe let's take 1 or 2 or 3 lessons from the Moses problem. One, the obvious, leadership is important. We have to think about it. How do we show leadership? Here's another one. Well, if we can't have complete clarity about where the church is going to be in 10, 20, 15 years, maybe we can at least see our way to the next village, if you understand my analogy, huh? Let's not worry about the fact that we can't give people total clarity about everything, but let's say, okay, look, let's get here. This much we can agree on, this is important, and then let's try to see the next village from that point. Here's another implication. Okay, Moses didn't have a total roadmap of where the promised land was, but he did have a lot of things that he had clarity about, like the 10 Commandments and so on. In other words, there are some things we do know, our values, what we stand for, who the Lord is, all those kinds of things. And so those are important parts of leadership to help people understand what are some of the things we can rely on. And here's another thing. I should do this as a test. We'll see who went to church last Sunday. There is an Exodus excerpt in last Sunday's reading, and the end of the very last sentence of the excerpt is something like, is the Lord in their midst, or is the Lord among us, or something like that. It was the last sentence of the chapter from Exodus. And here's what I want to take away from that. That amidst all the difficulties and uncertainties we have in showing leadership, if people do not see that the Lord is among us, amidst us, then we might as well hang it up and give up. Huh? So that's a really important leadership factor in times of uncertainty for a church. In other words, people at least have to see in us, okay, I mean, they have a connection to the Lord, there's something that they have that I wish I had, there's something that I want. So, we're going to need to create a whole new culture of leadership. These are some of its characteristics as I see it, huh? It's just my opinion. And now let's work through some of those, and I want to talk about the first one, to create a culture where everyone leads, where each person feels a leadership opportunity and responsibility, okay? And let me talk about that for a few minutes, and let me say this for starters. So who are leaders? Who are leaders? People thought of interesting names. Pope Francis, the bishop. I wonder who thought of their own name. I guess nobody, next to nobody. Or probably like if you thought of your own name, you didn't turn to the person next to you and say, me, Who's your list? Pope Francis. Oh, okay, me, We're raised in a culture that teaches us to be modest people. And Jesus talks about humility about every 30 verses in the Gospels, huh? So the modesty, the humility, is not only important, it's essential. By no means am I saying we need to become less modest as people. But what I am saying is that our concept of leadership is somehow broken. We have a wrong stereotype of what leadership actually is and looks like. In other words, when I say, let's think of the names of leaders, people's natural instinct is first to think positionally, in other words, the boss and so on, and not only that, but to think of super famous, super celebrity, super important. And that way of thinking is not going to solve any problems for us in any of your churches, in our diocese, in our church. And rather, I want to develop the idea that the first people we need to think about as leaders, if we understand the word correctly, are ourselves. And how would I justify that idea? The first way I would justify it is to thank you all, because you justified it for me. When we thought of the names of leaders, for the most part, we were all thinking of really famous people, huh? But then when I asked you to talk about the qualities of leadership, what qualities define a leader, every single idea that I heard was an idea that every one of us and all those people back in the parish could be role modeling tomorrow. People said to be people of integrity, to be able to inspire, to listen, to put people first, a number of ideas, every single idea. This was your definitional list, not mine. So by your definitions, we could show leadership. Another way I want to justify the point is by going right to the dictionary. And in the dictionary, you'd see different definitions of the word. One of those definitions would always be something like this: to point out a way, direction, or goal, and to influence others toward it. And isn't it true that everybody here is doing these words all the time? We're pointing out a way. We're not holding out a sign saying this is the way, but implicitly, by our lives, we're pointing out a way by whether or not we're honest or dishonest, whether we mostly compete with other people, or whether we would collaborate and support other people, by whether we're just in our behaviors or not. So we're pointing out a way, and we're having influence. You know? A lot of people here are parents. Could there be any more obvious example of pointing a way and influencing others than what parents do for kids over the course of their lifetime? So, good parenting, good leadership. Good parish membership, good leadership. So to me, one of the first takeaways, one of the first tasks for you guys is, in this kind of crazy VUCA environment where we need to bring more talent to bear on our many different challenges, can we help our fellow parishioners to understand, yeah, look, we all need to show up some more leadership because this is the world we all have right now. And the first time you say it, they're all going to say, look, I'm not the priest, that guy's the priest. I'm not the bishop, that guy's the bishop. I don't do the parish budget, the parish council does that. So we're going to have to help them to understand what we're saying, what we mean when we're saying it. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, we can say the definition, look, no, I'm sorry. Leadership is pointing away and having influence, and we need you to help us to point away and show influence so that we can bring more people to the Lord, or those who are showing up and bored and not getting anything out of it, they can have more enriching experiences. Now, we tend to think of leadership as a sort of a secular businessy idea, like I came up in a suit with a tie, and I'm sure half the people cringe. So I also want to take on the idea of how we might understand leadership as a deeply religious notion. And the first thing I would say is this, that for those of us who are Christians, who are Catholics, leadership, our sense of leadership is in a way a paradoxical idea. Because if I went around the room and I asked people to describe themselves as Christians, as Catholics, I bet a lot of people would use follower language. Somebody would say, oh, I'm a follower of Jesus. That's what it means. And of course we are. And our religious language uses words that have a very follower kind of connotation. In other words, we use words like vocation, disciple. You know the Latin word voco is to call. So if I call you, you're following me, you're coming to me, huh? But our religious language also uses words that have exactly the opposite meaning. We use words like mission and apostle. And those words have exactly the opposite meaning. Missio is I send. So if I send you somewhere, you're not following anybody. You're going, you're leading. So the first thing I want to point out in terms of how we think about leadership as Christians is that we need to live this paradox. In other words, there's a following and a leading going on always, all the time at the same time. And you can't opt for one or the other. I haven't seen that anywhere. I haven't read the whole catechism, but I don't see where you get to choose. I know the word missionary discipleship is a word that a lot of us use now in our parishes, huh? I don't think we often reflect on the fact that it's an oxymoron. In other words, the two words are opposite of each other. But maybe we should reflect on it because it tells us something important. That for us, leadership has its follower aspect and its leadership aspect, and we have to do both all the time. I think the 6th chapter of Isaiah is a beautiful meditation on the reality of this paradox. You know, every once in a while I get asked to talk to evangelicals, you know? Like those guys will know what's in the 6th chapter of Isaiah. We're all Catholics. I'll tell you what's in the 6th chapter of Isaiah. We can understand that Isaiah in some ways as the prophet's experience of call. You know, early in the chapter, he hears some call, and then he says, woe is me, I'm unworthy, I'm a man of unclean lips. And then as the chapter goes along, he feels himself touched by God's presence. In the imagery of the chapter, he's literally touched. An angel flies down from God's throne and touches his lips with a charcoal, and then later in the chapter, that call comes back. Whom shall we send? Who will go for us? And at that point, he's able to say, here I am, send me. I trust you hear this dynamic of following and leading in that Isaiah story I just related, huh? Our leadership is something about answering call, being nourished by the Lord, staying in touch with where our leadership mandate comes from, huh? When we baptize people, if I remember my catechism correctly, we say that we're baptized into a share of Christ's role as priest, prophet, and king. And, I mean, if those are not leader kind of words, I don't know what in the world is. And we all understand, when we teach the catechism of the baptismal promise, we completely understand that the word priestly could be used in different sort of senses. In other words, nobody thinks, oh, okay, I'm baptized, so now let me go up, I'm baptized into Christ's priestly role. Now let me go up there and consecrate some hosts. Let me show you how it's done. We all get that. So when I say leadership, of course I'm not saying, oh yeah, let me go out and write my own encyclicals because we have some ideas I don't like. I'm just saying that we understand our behavioral leadership as a behavior and what that means for us. Now, let me unpack another important idea. So one of the first things we're going to try to do is, before I do that, I know, who am I? Pope Benedict said exactly the same thing in his own words. Let me show you his quote before we move on. It's necessary to improve pastoral structures in such a way that the co-responsibility of all the members of the people of God in their entirety is gradually promoted. This demands a change in mindset, particularly concerning lay people. They must no longer be viewed as collaborators of the clergy, but truly recognized as co-responsible for the church's being in action. And please pay attention to these words. Many of you are parents. You know what co-responsibility means, or you know what responsibility means as a parent. It doesn't mean, my job is to bring in the money, and I'm going to outsource moral upbringing to somebody else, huh? If you're responsible, you're responsible. And look what Pope Benedict said. I mean, sometimes people accuse Pope Francis of being sloppy with words, huh? Nobody ever accused this guy of being sloppy with words. And look what he says. Don't listen to me. co-responsible for the church's being in action. He doesn't say co-responsible for making sure the collection is done, or that there are enough ushers, or that we have lectors. Co-responsible for the being in action. Those statistics that we looked at, all of us own those. And so all of us have to figure out solutions together as a team. And that's going to require what I call an entrepreneurial mindset. Some of you may not like that idea, that word, that's fine. Here's the way a company that does a lot of consulting describes a similar kind of idea that I think gets at what I'm talking about. Oh, geez, another idea I should share with you. So my first point is that we need to get more people into the game and help them to show leadership. Let me show you a couple of more statistics that show how far we have to go as a church in the United States. There's going to be 4 dot points on this slide, and you're going to see some numbers, and my message to you is, in your parishes, for these first 3 categories, the numbers within 6 months have to be above 90%. And it's the easiest thing in the world to accomplish. So look at this was a survey of people in the pews. In other words, people who come to church on Sunday. I feel invited and encouraged to participate in parish ministry. Only 47%. Clear to me how to become more involved. 32%. Parish leaders encourage me to explore my vocation. 26%. And so the 4th one, of course, follows quite naturally. I'm interested in becoming more involved, only 22%. Now, we can't necessarily guarantee that we're going to be able to improve this one right away. But my gosh, the first 3, absolutely we can improve dramatically. It would seem to me, one of our follow-ups is, whether it's the pastor, pastoral associates, parish council, we're going to start standing up and saying to folks, okay, look, my friends, we have some real challenges ahead of us, and we want to invite and encourage you to step up, and we're going to make sure that you know 100% clearly how to become involved. And in fact, this is part of your vocation as a Christian, and we're going to help you to explore that vocation. So if we could get the first 3 much, much higher, the 4th one might not go to 80% right away, but I bet it would go up. And the first 3, we could certainly control ourselves. The 4th one, the Holy Spirit has to get involved. Now, once we're inviting people to help us show leadership, we're going to have to create space for them to lead. Because they're going to say, oh man, look, there's enough ushers, enough lectors, what do you need me for? And the whole point is, no. It's not just about the things we do now. We're going to start creating different ways of attacking some of our challenges. Like maybe there's the people who are going to stand in back of the church and welcome people. Maybe those who are going to start coordinating, leading prayer groups we don't have. Maybe we're going to start calling on the phone people who never show up. So we're going to change some of the roles that we have to create space for people to leave. And that gets to the notion of being a more agile, a more entrepreneurial group. So we want to be a parish community where we're continually learning and growing, where people are encouraged to innovate, create, be open to change, empower people with a bias for action and an urgency to move forward. This would be a way of describing the kind of culture we want to try to create. And this is a businessy kind of phrase, but let me assure you that here's another idea where our Christian tradition brings a lot to the table. A few of you may know that one of the ideas that's deep in the Catholic spirituality, especially in the Jesuit tradition, is this idea that we need to make ourselves internally free in order to follow the mission. In other words, what sometimes happens is that because of our own inner baggage, our attachments, our chaos, our junk, it kind of inhibits us from being free enough, being open enough to do what the mission might be calling us to do. So we become attached to our own pride, the fear of making a mistake, fear of trying something new, attachment to the way everybody else has been doing it, the way it's been done before, our own ego needs, this is my little thing, I want to be in control, our own sinful attachments to greed, power, etc. I see a lot of people taking photos. Remember, you could send me an email, I'll send you all the slides, huh? To be more entrepreneurial is not just a businessy idea, it's also an invitation to be spiritually free, to go where the Lord is calling us. Pope Francis, in a homily, was once reflecting on the reality of the Israelites coming out of Egypt, and he spins this very idea. Look at what he says here. There's a temptation to say, it's better to stay here where I'm safe. But this is the slavery of Egypt. I fear moving forward. I'm afraid of where the Lord will bring me. Fear, however, is not a good counselor. So how do we make ourselves free? Now, let me show you another couple of prophets who will help us understand this concept that I'm getting at. I'm sure a few of you remember this guy. And I wonder if any basketball fans remember what records Kobe Bryant holds. Most points, most MVP awards, most steals, maybe he holds 2 or 3, all those records. In fact, there's only one important record that Kobe Bryant holds. It's a playful example, but not completely. Some of you teach kids or coach kids, and you know that a child whose whole life is governed by the fear of making a mistake never realizes his or her abilities to play the violin, to be a good basketball player, whatever it may be. And so that's true of us also. Here's another prophet who comes to the very same conclusion in a much more succinct way. And it's part of this is my personal opinion, huh? We all draw different conclusions, but one of my opinions is that we're too shy about taking shots as a church. And now, here's a conversation that I would invite you to have. We don't really have time to do it now, but when you go back to your parishes, maybe a conversation to have would be, are there unhealthy attachments, unfreedoms that could hold us back from making a choice we should make to further the parish's mission? You know, the point I made before about unfreedoms, attachments, huh? And the companion question, let's do a quick Gretzky audit. Are we taking enough shots? You know, with respect to how to bring back the people who left, with respect to making sure that people have a very deep encounter with the Lord when they come to our parish, with respect to trying to figure out how in the world are we ever going to gauge all these 18-year-olds and 23-year-olds who've left us, huh? Are we taking enough shots? Maybe every 6 months, let's sit around and say, okay, how many shots did we take? And how good do we feel about that? Should we have taken more? Now, I'm down to about 3 minutes, so I'm going to skip through some stuff because I want to make sure I get to another couple of points. And here is one of them. A lot of what I said when I laid this out had to do with the kind of culture that we all need to create, and it was kind of a big picture thinky presentation, huh? But one of the things that's always on people's minds, and rightfully, is how do we get going? How do we build momentum, huh? So let me share a couple ideas about that. So one, let's start creating a new cultural leadership, explain the need to fellow parishioners, create a burning platform, call others to lead. In other words, that whole first set of slides that I showed, which were about, look, my friends, we have some Catholic VUCA here, this is the reality we live in, we need you to step up and help us to realize the baptismal promise. So the first thing is, we have to call people into leadership, into missionary discipleship, use any word you want to use. If we don't call people, it's not going to happen. And for me personally, opinion, unless the most effective way to call people involves the burning platform. In other words, why is this important? Why should I care? What's the challenge that you really need me to help fix? Second point, Build a guiding coalition to help lead the change. I mean the word guiding coalition in a sort of an informal way. I'm not talking about like the named official guiding coalition. Rather, what I mean is this. One person is not going to get it done, the pastor's not going to get it done, 5 people are not going to get it done, the 10 people here are not going to get it done. But we don't need 100% of the parish either. My experience with human groups is if we could get 10% of the people who are with us, maybe 20%, very proactively with us. In other words, there's the harness, I'm willing to put my shoulders in the harness and help pull, and I'm going to help make the case for you. If we could get that guiding coalition, if we could figure out who's that set of people that are going to help us pull this thing forward, if we could figure that out in our minds, if we get the first 10 or 20%, I promise you the next 30% will come along, because that's always the way human groups are. And you know what sometimes happens is people's mindset is exactly the opposite. They think about the bottom 10%. In other words, the people who hate every idea, the people who are going to resist this thing, the people who think we're all nuts. And they say, oh, how am I going to change their mind? And you know what I say? Don't worry about it. There's nothing you're going to say that's going to change their mind. Instead of focusing on the most recalcitrant negative 10%, focus on the 10, 15% who are guiding coalition. Do a Gretzky audit, I said that. Be accountable. If you don't like that fancy word, let me put it this way. At the end of a year, how are you going to know you're successful? How do we know we're successful? Look for easy wins. Very important. I was in a breakfast with the pastors, and a lot of them are reflecting on how challenging a lot of this stuff will be. Well, look, it took us decades to arrive where we are now. If you think in 3 months all of this is going to be fixed, you're out of your mind. But people, if they see no progress at all, it's natural to start to feel discouraged. So I always say, focus on easy wins and celebrate easy wins. In other words, what do you know we can do? Well, I know we could stand up there and call everybody to help. That could be an easy win. If we did it, we know we did it. And sometimes ideas around becoming more welcoming, like standing in the back of the church and welcoming people, that's really easy to do. So also, let's always be mindful of some easy wins. Last idea, it's okay to have some fun. It's not like we're stupid and everybody else has this figured out, and we're the lunkheads who now are trying to catch up. Nobody really knows the answers, so it's a wonderful adventure that the Lord has given us here to try to say, okay, maybe we'll be the ones that figure out some of these answers. Very last idea, I know I'm over time. Let me let you read this quote and then I'll comment on it. I could see most of you were too young, but I remember when this guy came out of jail, huh? And I remember those first months and looking at that guy and thinking, holy cow, I mean, what a package this guy has. All the natural charisma and courage in the world, And then many years later, I was reading an interview with him and I saw this quote. And I feel like he was smacking me in the head, saying, hey, pal, like your hypothesis is that everything in South Africa came easily to me because I have all this courage and so on. Well, no, sorry, Chris, I was afraid. So now tell me what's your big excuse in life. And I've had the privilege of working with a lot of successful people, and by no means do I know all their stories, but in the cases where I know people's stories, I could tell you this. Everybody's afraid. Nobody has enough self-confidence. And, we can't wait around to the seminar or workshop or book that's going to transform us into the person who has all the courage and all the confidence that we always wish we had. I know we're told be not afraid, huh? But for almost all of us, everybody I've met, that takes a while to get there, huh? And so to me, leadership is not that we get over all of our issues, all of our lack of confidence, all of our fears, but instead that we honor the reality of calling. We've been baptized, we've been called, and that we honor that role and step up despite our issues and say, okay, look, I'm going to take the very best shots I can. And I'm going to trust in God, and I'm going to trust in God's Holy Spirit to guide me as I do it. Thank you very much for listening. Okay, no need to stand up.
So this is most definitely open for discussion. You all have read Chris's book, and I know a lot of you have questions. But I want to begin with one question, which stems from where you left us off. And I first want to start with a reflection of great positivity. My experience, I'm from Ohio, so I come from several hours away, entering into a new place with new people. What I've observed in the last couple of days is a great deal of freedom, in the best sense of the word. When Val Lamar was here, in 90 seconds, she got everybody here to be charismatic, which is amazing. So we were dancing, we were singing, we were all together. There was a great freedom, but often we do feel fear and bondage. He gave us the quote from Isaiah that his lips were touched with coal, and then he said, "Here I am, Lord, send me." So my question for you is, where do we need conversion as a church? What binds us? Where do we need to go to get spiritually free? What fears hold us back?
Yeah. Okay, so it's a great word, conversion. I'm sorry I didn't use the word. With respect to the church, I can't answer that question. You know, I mean, I have some opinions, but I don't know I can answer that question. But I guess I would say, with respect to where we're going back, I feel, to me, so I'm like an Irish Catholic kid from Queens. The Holy Spirit was not in the game, like it was about God and Jesus in my whole youth. And, the older I become, the more and more I appreciate that we really need to call God's Holy Spirit into our midst, that there's something we don't quite understand. To me, I often, as you know very well, because you read it, when I was reading the book, I kept getting drawn back to Acts and the upper room, We're afraid. We don't know what's going on. Something is happening here and we don't quite understand it. And to me, that is the absolute template for Holy Spirit time. So to me, that's, and especially for those of us for whom it's not, I'm not talking about the style of prayer, but just in terms of our spirituality, it's not the most normal thing for me, for anybody who are like me, and so maybe to get more open to calling the Holy Spirit into our midst, even if we can only say that. I don't know how to pray to you, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, I don't know what's going on, but help us to be open to understand where you want us to cooperate in leading the church right now. That's how I would see it.
Okay, wonderful. Do we have questions yet, Tom? No? Okay, well, I'm going to go with my own then. You mentioned this. If people don't see the Lord among us, we cannot even get started. And again, we've had an experience here of the Lord being among us. What's one of your favorite ideas for parishes to show forth in a very practical way where there's low-hanging fruit, that we can have people see the Lord among us?
Yeah. So let me say two things. One just happened recently. A friend of our family is going to be is in RCIA, a young girl. She's like 16 years old, and she wants to come into the church, and not because of any family support. It's her own thing. And they had the first scrutiny in St. Patrick's Cathedral not long ago, and I wasn't there, but my sister was there, and she told me that Cardinal Dolan did it, and he made this. At one point, he had this great comment. He talked about the realities that the church is suffering right now, in terms of scandal and so on. And he made this comment. He goes, something, when you think about all this, either you belong among us, he's speaking to those who are coming forward to be baptized, either you belong among us or you belong in a mental institution, And this is the point I want to make. In other words, could we live and treat other people, treat the poor people, treat those who come to us in such a way that people would say, wow, these guys have something. They got something that I want a piece of. Mm-hmm. Even despite what I just read in the newspaper that makes me think, oh man, I want zero part of that, Mm-hmm. So could we live, treat each other, pray, have our liturgies function in such a way that somebody might show up and say, oh wow, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's there, but I think I might like to understand what is there and have a bit of that. That is, to me, what it would look like.
Becomes deeply attractive,
Yeah.
despite all the
Yeah,
difficulties.
and of course, let me say this, which I think I did say in the book, very powerful for me, St. Ambrose, it's St. Ambrose, right, that helped convert Augustine. And a line that always struck me in Augustine's Confessions is, Augustine says, at first he drew me as a friend, you know? And Augustine, one of the major league heavy hitter thinkers, and the way in for a lot of people is not necessarily the case, the argument, but rather, let me connect with this person in a human way.
So even though he was this great intellectual who valued that kind of interaction, it was friendship that was foundational
Yes.
for Augustine. Great, we have a question from the audience.
So, Chris, from the audience, how do you engage with a pastor who might be afraid to let us try new approaches?
Yeah, okay. And this is all, this is in every human group in the world, this is always the problem, Like either the boss just doesn't get it, or the boss gets it, but the team doesn't get it, And unfortunately, you never seem to get the teams together with the bosses and to me, I don't think there are magic answers to human realities like that. But I guess I would say, one of the great lines of St. Ignatius is when he sent people in the days when the Protestants were like the enemies, he would send guys up into Northern Europe to deal with the Protestants and try to bring them back. And one of his lines was, sometimes you have to enter into the other person's door in order to come out your own, And so my point is this, like whether it's the recalcitrant parishioners, the recalcitrant team, the recalcitrant pastoral associate, recalcitrant pastor, have we at least done the work to understand, to stand in their shoes and understand, okay, what is it that makes him or her afraid, reluctant, whatever, and sometimes you can create it's something we can solve together and boom. To me, that's always the best first approach. But let me be very frank with you, and I said this in the book. I'm a great believer. One of the social entrepreneurs, this guy is not a religious person, but he works with entrepreneurs. And when I asked, if you remember that part of the book, about skills that they find in great entrepreneurs, one of the things he said was good guerrilla skills, like a guerrilla army, And his point was, it's never easy for an entrepreneur. There's not enough money, or people are against me, or the obstacles seem too big, or somebody else is doing it better than. There are always problems. And so one of the characteristics of successful entrepreneurs is they have the guerrilla skills to say, okay, it's straight ahead is not going to work. Let me go around this way, or let me do that way. Or, so in other words, if the pastor is a roadblock, and please, I suspect that maybe in rare or no cases is that a problem. But just speaking theoretically, what guerrilla skills? Hey. You want to hear what those guys say about you? Can I come up with the guerrillas, the creativity, the ingenuity? Not to be negative, confrontational, fighting, that's not my point, but another way to get where we need to go as a church.
Great. We've got time for one more question.
In the business world, we do loss reviews when we lose a customer. We don't seem to do that in the church, other than assumptions. What can we do to find out why a person or a family leaves?
Beautiful. To me, this is another easy win, huh? When somebody stops coming, and often we know they stop coming because the green envelopes stop coming in, huh? Why don't we call them? And, make sure that they understand, at least make sure that they understand they were cared about. We cared about enough to notice that you don't come.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure you're welcome. And we respect you enough that we want to hear why. Tell us. and with a non-judgmental posture. Now, I don't think that first phone call is the time to say, no, you're wrong. Let me tell you why you're wrong. Maybe that's the time to listen and eat a little humble pie, huh? And I wonder how many people leave, and it sometimes crosses their mind to say to one another, I wonder if they even noticed we're gone. And remember, he teed it up in terms of business. Forget business. Jesus said, I leave the 99 behind to go after the one. And look, if we're going to do an examination of conscience, I'm going to use the word I shouldn't use. I mean, we suck at that. We're not going after the one. We're kind of settling. I'm comfortable here with the 99. Oh, gee, now it's 95. Oh, gee, now it's 89. They're still here. And that is not what Jesus said. I mean, we cannot, if for a business purpose, we can't win like that. But forget business. What Jesus told us is, you have to go after the people, after the others.
Chris, what I hear you saying is that, and this is a theme that we've heard a lot of, it's not so much about the process or the business system. Fundamentally, this is an issue of personal relationship.
Yeah.
And when we treat people as statistics rather than as persons, we miss them. So of course they're going to leave. But if we encounter them as persons and listen carefully and love them as unique persons, then of course they'll come back ultimately.
Yeah, perfect, beautiful. Yeah. And of course, lest we, I know we have no confusion in a group like this. The ultimate personal relationship is not the relationship with me, the parish council. The personal relationship is with the Lord, huh?
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate.
Right. That's a good closing word.
Yeah, that's the ultimate game there. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris, very much. All right, let's go. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that very inspiring talk to us and keeping us very anchored in how this gets to be very real for us. And I love some of the things that Chris was talking about, so I took some notes, is that creating a new culture of leadership in the church, that we're moving on together, that we have a one-team mindset, and that we're about generating solutions. But I will not lose sight of what Chris said at the end, which is, this is all about our own personal relationship with Jesus and going to get the one. So it's critically important for us to keep that in mind in the work that we do. So thinking about also another comment made is that Chris made is that leadership is actually a deeply religious notion. Leadership. And also what he said is that following and leading, we're doing it together all the time. There's no really one or the other. Together, all the time, following and leading. The other thing is, everyone is afraid. We're all afraid thinking about going forward and doing this work. So, Chris, thank you very much for what you offered to us this morning, and thank you, Josh, for facilitating that great conversation at the end. Thank you. I would like to invite my partner in holiness, Deacon Anthony Seo, back to the stage to join us. So you've been on this journey with us too for a year, and we've certainly spent some time focused on Chris's book, and you've listened to the conversation, so you probably captured a thought or two different from me.
I'm not sure I captured a thought different than you, because I think you've summed it up very well. We have heard so much information. There's so many good things that we have heard. And now we need to begin to process it. And as I heard this, something kept coming back to me. And it's something that Cardinal Tobin said. He said that we need to be more conscious of the people that we see in our peripheral vision. And I think that's a key to a lot of what we're talking about. If we could see those people more clearly in our peripheral vision, if we can find the need and fill it, if we can find the hurt and heal it, we will be doing the work that we need to do to bring others to Christ and to strengthen our church. So that's what I would share.
Thank you, Anthony.